Now it's like a meat locker. I should have wore 3 more shirts.
Oh, come on. Feeling good.
Okay,
I have a sweater you can borrow.
welcome to the CCWD meeting of Wednesday, June 13th. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Rebecca, can you take the roll, please?
Director Strange?
Here?
Director Davidson?
Here.
Director Thomas?
Yes, I'm here.
President Underhill?
Here.
And President Ryan?
Yes, here. Public comment, at this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. Public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action will be taken on these matters that are not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Do you have any public comment today? Okay, seeing none, we're gonna move on to the consent agenda. We have items 3A, approval of minutes for the board meetings of May 16th. Review of the Board of Directors' monthly timesheets for May 2018, and approve to ratify claim summary number 555 in the amount of $1,594,34.10. And then 3D is report on write-off of uncollectible accounts receivable for the period December 1/17 through May 31st, 2018. And a reminder to turn on your microphones.
I move for acceptance.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have motion and a second on the consent agenda. Rebecca, you take roll?
Director Strange?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Underhill?
Yes.
President Ryan?
Yes. Thank you. Item 4, new business, discussion action regarding approval of an exception to district policy regarding termination of service for 10 Vista Del Lago Drive, Valley Springs. We might have got to this item a little quicker than usual. Stacy Lawler is going to be presenting this.
We went over it. I'm pretty familiar with it, and I'm confident.
Well, she has entered the building
Okay. Dang it, I was just gonna make a motion.
right on time.
It's like a comet.
Thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome.
Take it away.
Okay, so today what I am presenting to you is request approval for an exception to our district policy regarding termination of services for 10 Vista Del Lago Drive in Valley Springs. This was presented to the board about a month or so ago by Robbie Kramer in our engineering department. And it was requested for us to come back to the board to see how this request compared to our exceptions policy or resolution. And we did some research, and resolution 2002-86 has to do that says that the district will not accept any exceptions to construction standards or fee waivers. In this situation, because Caltrans did a project that widened the road and permanently removed the landscaping along Vista Del Lago Drive, it's requested that we make an exception to our no termination policy, which is Article 3, Section 21E, Article 3 of our rules and regulations. We have other services or other means for customers to terminate service temporarily through our suspension of services, but that's if there is damage to the property or home and it's temporary only. It cannot last longer than 6 months. In this situation, it doesn't apply because it's a permanent removal of the landscaping. So with that, the staff believes that these are unique circumstances that were out of the control of the customer. Additionally, the customer does have 2 other meters on the property. One meter that does serve the gas station, the second meter that does serve the office building in the back.
You know, there is landscaping there.
I mean, there's landscaping on all sides of that.
And that's, to my knowledge, that is served with the main meter that runs the gas station, not, that's not served with the landscaping meter that was installed.
The landscaping meter's only out on the, because there's even some landscaping out there.
And he does indicate in his letter, our customer does indicate that, in his letter to us, it's a part of our package, that it make, so I'd like to make a request to eliminate landscaping, let's see, that
Well,
most of the landscaping
right.
is eliminated.
I was under the impression that all of the landscaping was eliminated. In here, he does say most of it is eliminated.
And then he says there's no need for a separate water meter, so it sounds like it's been greatly reduced or mostly reduced. Most of his landscaping has been reduced to not having landscaping.
Right, my understanding is the landscape that is there is serviced by the main meter for the gas station,
And that little commercial building's on its own separate deal.
which is located behind the facility.
Okay, discussion, comments from the board?
So it looks like he has two other water meters, one of which is being used, I assume, for landscaping and the other for his facility.
There's a total of three
in the
meters.
gas.
One was landscape only, that serviced the landscaping that was removed by Caltrans.
Most of it.
The other one is the second one is a meter that services the gas station and the other landscaping around there. And then the third one is the building in the back behind the gas station.
Excuse me. So my question would be, how much water is coming out of the one that's going to be removed?
How much water, what do you mean?
How, you know,
How much water has been, apparently nothing is going through it now.
Right, yeah, there's been no use,
okay.
right, for three or four billings, well, no longer than that. 4 or 5 billing cycles, at least.
So 4 or 5 billing cycles, there's been no use from the meter, the
landscape.
landscaping meter that he wants to have, okay, which tells us that the meter that he uses for the gas station is sufficient and has been being used for the remaining landscaping, and it
Correct.
was set up that way to begin with.
Correct.
He probably hasn't, unless he's done some changing of but that tells us something, that there's been no use for 4 or 5 billing periods, which would be each billing period is a 2-month,
Correct.
okay. So he's been charged for the use of the meter with no use at all. And these are unique circumstances.
Well, my only issue is whether or not it's ever gonna make a difference, because the way we have figured out commercial capacity fees in the past has all been based on, we do an estimate of use, and the landscape meter was always taken off of that, because obviously you're not treating that, the landscape water is not going, in the sewer system. How is this gonna affect, us moving forward? If everybody wants to request this, how are we gonna do that math to figure out what a capacity fee is gonna be for a commercial business?
Well, in this case, it was the use, or the meter use, or the landscape that this particular meter was used for has been removed, not on the own accords of the owner. Caltrans removed took this property, whether it was condemnation or they paid them a price for it, and they can't put that landscaping back in that area that used to service, or that this meter used to service.
It's almost like an eminent domain situation. Caltrans comes along and takes the entire piece of property that had landscaping on it, or
That's not my
repurposes. Well, no, but repurposes maybe it's a sidewalk that's there now, or the
It is
street is
sidewalk.
wider, so they've repurposed the area, so it's not, no longer his
There's
area of
landscaping
landscaping.
there.
Well, it's-
Landscaping all the way around that property.
but the
It's not
landscaping,
very good, but it is, and it needs to be irrigated, but it's not maintained very well. I think that, you know, I mean, I don't even know if the county, I believe, has landscape requirements on commercial establishments. I mean, you know, I know when we've done commercial projects, you gotta go and identify, you know, plants and, you know, it's a big pain in the butt, you know? So, I mean, I really don't care one way or the other, but I want that question to be answered in regards to commercial capacity fees. We have, in the past, we've tried to separate the landscape water from the usage so we can actually determine if they've paid their capacity fees properly. So as long as that's resolved, I really don't care, but you know, there is landscaping that probably should be maintained there. You know, I just don't know, I mean, what would the recourse, now this is probably a landscape meter that didn't cost him anything.
Correct. There was no capacity fees paid.
But if the county comes out and says, hey, you need to get back out there and water, he either has to just hook it up to, make sure he actually repairs the system so it works off his current meter. I guess he could still accomplish it with that, but.
President Ratterman,
Yes.
in response to Director Davidson's question, when we look at a commercial lot, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Robbie, we do look at, especially if there's sewer involved, we look at water consumption and we look at the type of business. And generally, we do request that they have a separate landscape meter so we can track the outdoor usage separately, and I think that's what you're referring to. So in technical terms, he will, if he uses the water off of the existing meter to landscape, that water usage is then part of that calculation as to how much, what we look at as far as a sewer multiplier, if he is indeed on sewer. So it does make things a little bit more challenging. It doesn't hurt the district, it could hurt the individual. And I know the state's looking for people to go, especially commercial businesses, to have separate landscape meters.
okay, thank you, Jeff.
Well, the reality of that property is there's landscaping all the way around it. You know, it's just shrubbery and stuff like that, but it does exist.
And again, I was under the impression that all the landscaping had been removed, and there was no need to have anything watered there. I'm not getting, and based upon what you're saying, that's not the case here. So what happens if someone else decides that they want to get rid of their landscape and landscape meter and get rid of 60% of it and leave 40%, then can they come back in and say, well, I got rid of most of my landscape, you let this guy get rid of his meter, why can't I now get rid of my meter?
Under this circumstance, though, I think the argument is legitimate, that the removal of the meter wasn't at his choice.
Is the meter gone?
No, the meter's still.
Yeah, the meter's still there.
That's what it
Okay,
is.
and
He just doesn't want to use it anymore.
our resolution,
No, there are maybe one or two plants left in the landscaping area. You're right, there are still plants there, but they're not gonna be there very long, and he's not watering them. He's not used that landscaping meter.
It's not because of the, of Caltrans, I mean,
Well, it is because of Caltrans, that entire, his side of the road, the sidewalk was moved, the meters were moved, and the planting areas, whatever you would call them, planting beds, they're maybe a couple of feet across now where they were 6 or 8 feet deep, where you needed a landscape meter. As the person that does the commercial calculations here for the district, I'm not gonna change anything. And if someone came in, I mean, the calculations that I do, which have been described, if somebody comes in and says, I got rid of 60% of my landscaping, I'd like to get rid of my meter, I'll tell them no.
No, they'll say most. I got rid of most of my landscaping,
By choice.
just like a fella did here.
No, Terry,
No,
he's
you
saying,
didn't do that.
he's saying,
Caltrans
yeah,
did that.
he's saying by choice. If a
We wouldn't
customer,
have ever heard from this guy if Caltrans hadn't signalized that intersection. He'd still be watering his plants.
Out on the intersection, but he's also got shrubbery alongside of his, if you drive into the station, the property to the north has a strip of landscaping. Vista del Lago has a strip of landscaping. There's some around, over on the highway. You know, it's not, you know, it looks like a place that needs to be landscaped. I mean, I don't care how he serves it, but I just, you know, the premise of this, I think Terry brings up a good point. I mean, if I was paying the monthly fees for a landscape meter and only had a small quantity of water that I was landscaping, I'd come in and ask for this, you know, for this variance as well. I don't know who wouldn't, you know, because if it's depending on how much of the usage is at the store or wherever they're gonna operate, you know, why wouldn't they just wanna, you know, use, you know, just pay the, you know, for the extra water usage as opposed to the
Yeah.
maintenance.
That was my question, how much water, or how much is his bill for this third meter?
it's been zero for
Monthly-
eight
well, no,
months.
No,
It's not
no,
zero, it's the,
no, it's,
it's the base rate.
Yeah, that would be the base rate. He would never have exceeded that.
The use is zero.
So am I hearing you say that the district should be responsive to this type of request then, Jeff, in your opinion?
I don't like these variances. I mean, you know,
yeah, I know.
I mean, we have a no variance policy. You know, it's actually in here, you know, Resolution 2002, 86.
You signed it.
I was, and no, I think I'm gonna
Director
live up to it as well.
And Director Underhill voted against it. Is the back page, is that also this part of the same resolution? The back of that page? Calaveras County Water District policy regarding exceptions to standard rules and policies?
Yes.
I'd feel more comfortable if I saw some photos of before and after, to where I really know where I'm at to support this. Otherwise, I'm not gonna be able to support it.
I can support this, and I think it's good to be flexible and look at the circumstances. This does involve Caltrans taking away most of his shrubbery. Staff is obviously in agreement with making this exception.
Well, good. You
If it's-
explain that to the folks that are gonna get hit with a higher water bill coming up now, that we're taking one more out.
Well, my biggest concern is the setting the precedent. I don't.
Yeah,
you know,
I
I
don't-
think that, you know, and I mean, commercial properties in Calaveras County are required to have landscaping, you know? So, I mean, I don't know that we want to undermine, you know, the wishes of the planning department. I don't care how he waters it.
And I think he's still able to water it sounds like, with his other 2 meters that he's already paying for on the same property.
No, I'm sure he can.
And
It's
I
just-
don't think
But
it's
they're for
setting a-
different purposes.
and I don't think it's setting a precedent with future. It's all gonna be taken one at a time, and this is only, even our resolution, if it's passed, is only for this address.
And I would not think that we, you know, this would become a thing to do, Jeff, because, you know, he didn't have any control over this. This was Caltrans.
And that is one of the things that we're talking about. If someone's even said, one of us has even said, if someone desires to start removing shrubbery and then asks us to do this, I don't know, there'd be totally different circumstances.
Right.
Totally different circumstances, that they, to avoid a financial fee, they do something themselves, which is against this, the resolution that you signed back in 2002. It does fit in there.
Gotta start conserving more water. Well, you forced me to conserve more water, so I took my shrubs out with that landscape meter, and now you anyway, it just, you guys go ahead. I mean, we can take a vote.
We need a motion and a second.
You want a motion before public comment, or?
We could do, take a motion,
All right, I would move in favor of this resolution with a change in the spelling of county. You see that?
Okay, we got a motion in front of us. Anyone like to second this motion?
I'll go ahead and second it.
Good.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. We've had plenty of discussion. Any public comment? Seeing none, Rebecca, you take roll?
Director Strange?
No.
Director Davidson?
No.
Director Thomas?
Yes.
Director Underhill?
Yes.
President Ryder?
Yes.
Now we're a split board again.
Oh, man.
Just like the old days.
We're heading back to 2002.
My daughter.
Roll down a window. Okay, item 4B. That was more lively than I thought it was going to be. Discussion action regarding fund transfer of unclaimed checks. Jeff?
Oh, wait till Jeff gets back.
Oh, Jeff is in, Jeff's here. It's Terry that's meandered.
Mr. President, good afternoon, members of the board. There is going to be a slight change to this request, and I'll get into that in just a moment. The item before you today is a request adopting a resolution approving the transfer of funds on unclaimed checks to the General District Fund. A little history on this. Financial Management Policy 5.04, our unclaimed check policy, provides authorization and guidelines for procedures to take possession of long outstanding unclaimed checks. And we're talking checks that are at least 3 years old. They have not been claimed, or if they have been claimed, it's not a verified claim. And we have to go through certain procedures to put this in public notification. We do so in the enterprise, and it was posted April 19th and April 26th. Generally, the guidelines say if it's not claimed within 45 days, you can go to the board, and the board can authorize by resolution that those items become property of the district. Anything less than $15, we don't go through that process by policy. It does get a little expensive to do this. It was about $500 to post a public notice. So we don't do that this often. We wait until we accumulate enough checks. And if you take a look at the attachment, there's a number of checks there. And in fact, they go back to 2008, the very first check on the list. And the youngest check, so to speak, is March of 2014. They total $3,320.70. I received a phone call this morning from Director Thomas regarding one of the checks. It's made out to Young's Copper Ace Hardware, and there was conversations with this agency or this company, and they would like to submit a claim for these funds. And although it is past the 45-day limit, Section 5.04.23 states the Director of Administrative Services may release to the depositor of the unclaimed money, their heir, beneficiary, or so forth, upon submitting proof satisfactory to the Director of Administrative Services, myself. Once an item is placed on this resolution and you pass the resolution, that basically becomes property of the district. What I am proposing at this point is to remove that particular check from this list and allow them to submit the paperwork as required for me to review it. If for some reason that claim is not approved, this check will go back on the unclaimed fund list and it'll be rolled forward to the next time. I would just rather prefer that we do it this way than have to go back, once the resolution is passed, and undo what your board has done. So the resolution as stated will have to be changed. The resolution, excuse me. It says, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Directors hereby invokes Financial Management Policy 5.04, takes possession of a certain dollar amount as referenced. We're going to change that dollar amount. It'll be less the $315 and $315.28. And the attachment list we will remove check number 109817 to Young's Ace Hardware. And I apologize, I used this list to create my math for the new number, so I've got to go back and do that. In the meantime, if you have any questions, I can answer them at this
I
point.
think it's 2963.95.
Very good. You have a, what was that again?
2963.95.
Thank you. And the amended dollar amount on the attachment will be $3,005.42 on this list of checks. The other number here also identifies those checks under $15.
Okay. I'd like to make a comment. We discussed this thoroughly in finance, and just like Director Thomas, I went through this list, and either I know of or I know specifically the person who is, involved in this. One of my questions was for the State Water Resources Control Board. That should have been something, that should have not been on the list. Another one for the California Rural Water Association, but Jeff Myers is telling me they have this procedure that they have to go through. They put it in the newspaper, and we talked about whether or not the Calaveras Enterprise was, the paper, maybe we should put it in more than one paper?
And at this point, I'd like to follow up on your comments, Director Underhill. For the first 6 months when a check is issued, we do follow up with vendors to make sure they cash it. So it's not as if we send it out and ignore it. So we do outreach, but it's kind of a rolling list. So as we go in and get more people who we issue AP checks to on the list, those that are 6 months and beyond tend to fall off the list. The two checks that Director Underhill was referring to, California Rural Water Association, that was from 2010. State Water Resource Control Board was 2011, 7 years ago. So we've waited a number of years because, again, we want to wait until it's economically advantageous for us to go through this process. And we have followed procedures, we've had processes, and our staff's recommendation is for your board to adopt the modified resolution removing Young's Copper Ace Hardware.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff, for reaching out to the folks at Young's Hardware. I appreciate it very much. And unless there's other discussion, I'd like to move for approval of this resolution as modified.
Okay, we got a motion. Any second or discussion?
I'll second it.
Got a motion and discussion. Any discussion here? Any public comment? Rebecca, you take roll?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we're back to unanimous again.
Hey, we're back in business.
Oh, I would have said no then, had I known.
Okay, item 4C on our agenda is presentation of the preliminary fiscal year 18-19 operating and capital improvement program budget. Jeff Meyer?
If you give me a moment, I'm going to fire up the PowerPoint, and some board members and myself may need some coffee.
Okay.
To everyone's surprise, my goal is to keep this very short, because I know next Tuesday, we're going to have the budget workshop. What I'd like to be able to do here today is just to kind of go over the documents that are before you, the preliminary budget for both operating and CIP, kind of give you an overview of how we arrived at the budget documents and things you can look for, and then have your questions ready when we come back next Tuesday. The budget documents, let me go over those quickly. The packet in front of you includes page 1, which is a summary page of the operating budget. This is similar to last year's, shows revenues, expenses. What's new is on the right-hand side. I now break it out to water and sewer. It's not on the PowerPoint at this point. I just wanted to go over the documents. Page 2 is the revenues for this year. Page 3 and 4 is the overall district expenditures. Again, this is similar to the documents we've had in the past. Pages 5 through 11 are the individual departmental budgets. Page 12 is capital outlay budget, and 13, 14 are the CIP budgets for both water and sewer. And I'll get into those in a little bit, but I'm not going to drill down deep into these. Again, I'll leave it to next Tuesday. How we got through this process. If you remember, we, in conjunction with HDR, performed a 5-year financial analysis as part of the rate study. The basis of that analysis was our fiscal 17-18 budget. And then we went from there, including cost escalators. But even more important, we identified funding gaps. And your board decided we were going to reduce some of that funding gap via cuts. And so that had to be worked into this process. And that was almost $400,000 worth of cuts. So we did that. And most of those are included in this budget that you'll see today. We also had to reduce revenues in years 1 to 3 because of the level rate plan that we did. The first iteration of the rate plan that HDR provided was that 1-year catch-up where we raised rates significantly or higher in the first year for both water and sewer. Leveling it out, that decreased the amount of revenues we get in the first couple of years, but catches up in the back years. So that in itself also caused a shortfall in revenues of about $400,000 in totality, and we looked at what we had to do to reduce expenditures via that as well. So all those things were built into the budget, as well as trying to figure out what our new water consumption, water use revenues are going to be, because we have that new rate structure. When we put this all together, working with HDR and internally, we actually did a fairly good job of cutting expenses. It wasn't easy, and the only resulting transfer in we needed to help the revenue shortfall was $370,000 from the special project fund for capital projects, capital outlay equipment and projects. We've done that in the past. We're moving forward. One of the pieces of equipment we're going to buy is significant, and that's $300,000. That takes up the majority of it. The other thing that, unfortunately, because of the rate revenues and such, and we're taking money out of special project funds, this initial budget does not include any funding for the North Fork FERC relicensing reserve. But we do plan to come back in mid-year, once I get a feel for where our revenues are going to be. Some people are a little bit more optimistic than myself when we're looking at consumptive revenues. I had to be conservative, but if revenue projections are higher, we'll be able to start funding that reserve at mid-year. I just want to be conservative because we have no track history on billing for every drop of water. And that's where the challenges are going to be, especially with people trying to rebound and use, and the unfortunate law that was passed just recently on consumption, mandated consumption that people are already reacting to. In looking at revenues, as I mentioned, I worked with HDR to take a look at water consumption revenues under the new rate structure. We've also, as I mentioned, looking for rebound. One of the assumptions within the rate study is we'd get another $150,000 worth of water revenues in 18-19. We're seeing an uptick currently, so I'm fairly confident of that. The rest above and beyond that, I just don't know. As I mentioned, customer service is already getting phone calls, people who are concerned about 55 gallons per day. When do they have to start that? When are they going to get penalized? It's unfortunate, but it's reality. And customer service has done a very good job of educating our customers on usage. Use it wisely, but there are no restrictions at this point. Property tax revenues. If you look at property tax revenues, projection is another $290,000 over budget. This year's revenues are higher than anticipated. County is projecting maybe an 8% increase for 18-19 based on increased assessed values. I'm looking at an average of about 5.3%. Reason for that is the majority of our property tax revenues actually comes from improvement districts, fees that we have on via the improvement districts, not so much on the general property tax revenues. But we're still looking for an uptick there. Investment income is moving upwards because of, obviously, you've seen higher rates. However, power sales are going down a little bit. New Hogan, it kind of fluctuates with lake levels. This year, in fact, New Hogan was down for 2 months via repairs. So I need to be conservative on that. But overall, we're looking at $834,000 of additional revenues from 17-18 to 18-19. We do have what we call transfers in. It's not necessarily revenue, but it's money that we use to help offset costs. Up in this area at the very top, these are transfer in for debt service. We put debt service in the operating budget so it's transparent. So what the source of those debt is in the capital R&R funds, and so we transfer money in for both the sewer R&R and water R&R. This is nothing new. It is going up a little bit on the water because we're getting towards the end of the loan where the payments escalated. This is our $370,000 out of special project fund for capital equipment, but I do want to highlight we're not having to bring in money to fund to make up for the shortfall and our funding gap like we did last year, which was a one-time fix, nor are we having to bring in money from the water rights reserve. So we're doing better there. And these are the monies that come in through the capital R&R and the CIPs that help offset the cost of staff working on those projects. On the expenditure side, expenditures are going up approximately $591,000. Excuse me. This includes an increase in debt service of $524,000, and I'll get into that in a moment. It also includes an increase in salaries and benefits of $508,000. The majority of that increase is related to PERS and retiree health. PERS costs have gone up $121,000. That's part of the PERS move to lower their discount rate, their projected rate of return, and it's going up each year over 7 years. The retiree health, we had a new valuation that was just completed, and it went up by $156,000. That's our portion for pre-funding retiree health. Good news is it's projected over the next 4 years to start going down. We've been very diligent in setting money aside, and that's a good thing. So over the next several years, it'll go down by in 3 years, it'll go down by a total of $50,000, the pre-funding portion. Capital outlay did drop a little bit, so we're looking at $591,000 in added expenses for capital outlay. What we have here is a list of equipment and a few projects. Starting off, we've been doing vehicle replacement over the last several years, replacing our trucks that have gotten old or in a state of disrepair. Your board adopted a surplus list recently, and we've taken vehicles to auction, and actually we are doing quite well on that. We're getting the checks flowing in, and it is higher than we anticipated, so that's a good thing. The biggest item on this list, well, let me back up a second. We are requesting $30,000 for a snow ATV for upcountry. We did have a snowcat at one point, but it's no longer usable. When we have tanks and equipment out in the areas backcountry where we have to get to during the snow, we need for the staff to be able to get out there. And Jesse can answer some questions on that if you'd like. The hydro excavator, as you're aware, in the claim summary, if you looked at the detail, we made our last loan payment on the VACON. And now we have another VACON that's in disrepair. They get used a lot, and there's a lot of miles on those, and they're expensive, so we only buy one every 5, 6, 7 years. We were looking at taking out a loan on another VACON, but staff and Jesse were looking at what's our alternative, because most of the use on this VACON is for leak repair. When they go in and have a line break, water line break, they have to dig out and suck up and get the dirt out, and they've been using the VACON because of its suction capability. VACONs run about $460,000. This unit right here, hydro excavator, is used solely for the purpose of leak repair. It's less expensive, about $300,000. It's got a longer life expectancy. It's more mobile, and it really fits our need to do leak repairs, because obviously it's faster if you have equipment to dig out all the rock below and the soil below the streets than it is to actually use a backhoe, excavator, or shovels. And it's also a lot safer, and it quickens the job. We have some PRV vaults down in Copper at Sawmill we want to work on. Handheld meter readers are in this again. We have to replace our meter readers, the little handheld meters that we go in and plug in the reads on each individual meter. They're beyond its life expectancy. We were actually hoping to do it this year, but we weren't able to go through that process. We're still looking at RFPs for meter replacement, AMI, AMR. Until we do that, we're hesitant to invest a lot of money into the latest technology. These are for $15,000, and it allows us to move along. And even if we do a AMR, AMI replacement program, it's going to take at least 3 years, and we can't afford for these to go down. They're no longer supported by census.
And are we talking about this AMR or AMI in conjunction with reducing our meter reader staff? Is that what?
Not at all.
No.
It will allow us to repurpose staff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Yes, and allow them to do other things, because they do help in distribution and other areas, and there's a number of things that they can do besides reading meters.
Right, right.
Yeah. And finally, antenna replacement. We work through the county for our internet through Comcast, and we want to boost our capability through the county for the sight line to improve our reception and speed. The next item is debt service. We have our PERS side fund loan that we refinanced back in 2012, I believe it was, and that actually, the last payment we're going to be making is April of 2019, next spring. So that will go off. The 2013 refunding loan, we paid that off, so that goes off the books. I just put that up there for comparison. Our R&R loans have gone up because we're paying more on the principal payment on the water side. We have the REACH 3A bond. The VACON loan's been paid off. We still have the New Hogan loan. And now if you look towards the bottom, there's 2 new items. the admin building loan, which is included in this year's budget to pay it off for the next 5 years, and the sewer fund loan. This is a loan that we incorporated into the rates because over the last 2 years, sewer has not collected enough to pay for the operating budget. So we're beginning that 10-year payback process. The maturity dates for a number of these loans, the capital R&R is March of 2021. The sewer fund loan is 2028. New Hogan is 2024. Admin building is 2023, and the USDA is 2056. Unless we find funds to be able to repay that early. There we go. The department summaries. This is comparative to fiscal year 17-18. I'm not going to go into great detail. You can look at the individual departmental budgets. We incorporated the funding gap cuts and other cuts as we moved along. So this is, I'll go into more detail on Tuesday. Here's the summary. This is bottom line. We pretty much got a balanced budget. As we reduced $850,000 in expenditures because of the funding gap reduction and the smoothing, we have a budget surplus projected of a little under $4,500 next year. And if you look at the page 1 of your summary, both sewer fund and water fund are balanced. So we're moving in the right direction, which was the aim and the goal of this whole rate plan and financial analysis. Before I go on to CIP, are there any questions on the operating budget? Okay.
No.
Nope.
The PowerPoint slides you see now are different than the ones in your packet. The ones in your packet provide a lot more information, and if I tried to put this on a slide, nobody could read it. So I have changed the presentation of it slightly to show something that I think is more important. And in this case, what you see is the project description, and I'm starting with the existing projects going down to the new projects for 18-19, and you can look at your pages 13-14 for that. Total project costs to date, the cash flow for 18-19, the rest of the cash flow from fiscal year 2019 through 2021, which is a 3-year horizon we use for CIP, and the funding level. And this funding level is going to be critical as we move along because we just don't have enough money to do all the projects that we'd like to, which means we're either going to have to push them out significantly or revisit the projects or look for grant funds. Charles and I spent a lot of time trying to work through this capital improvement program budget to match the cash flow. Because remember, most of our cash for these projects is either there are R&R funds or grant funds. A little bit of assessment district funds when it comes to Wallace, and sometimes expansion funds when we're talking about projects that increase capacity. But the majority of the funding comes from our R&R fund, so we did a cash flow analysis looking at each year and determining if we can afford it or not. So the projects that you're looking at are on the right-hand side. Those are if it's not 100%, we have some concerns. Doesn't mean that it's not going to be completed. It could just be pushed out significantly until either A, some cash flow, or B, some grant money. Now, back on the debt service slide, I mentioned that our debt service on the R&R funds, the loans, is March of 2021. Once those loans are paid off, The water fund gets approximately 1.2 million in additional revenue, the sewer fund 397,000 in additional revenue. That'll help us to be able to complete some of these projects that's been pushed out. The other part that it could do is free up some money for additional loans if we want to go that route. On the sewer side, we're hoping to get some grants, especially when we look at the copper area. As you look here, we have identified $36 million worth of water projects. About $2 million have been spent year to date, or up to currently on these. Cash flow for next year is $8.6 million. Through 2019, 2021, another $13 million. But that only identifies 2/3 of the funding necessary to complete all the projects that are listed. And there's some of them that you see that obviously create some concerns. One of them is, if I go back a page, Jenny Lynn AB transmission line. At this time, we've only identified 11% of the funding necessary for the project as it is currently scoped. However, Charles and Bob and others have been, and Jesse in operations have been looking for alternatives that could be, maybe provide some interim fixes, pressure PRVs and things, to be able to allow it to function until we are able to do the project and rescope the project. So it's not as if we're ignoring the problem. We're looking at creative ways to fix the issues, but funding is going to be is definitely an issue when it comes to revenues. And this is even more, this points out how reliant this district is on those capital R&R funds to complete these projects. On the sewer side, it's a similar situation where R&R funds provide most of our funding, other than the West Point Wilseyville, which is grant money. And then we're hoping to get either grant or low-interest loans for the copper projects. But you can see in the middle of the page, the lower half of the page, the La Quintana wastewater rehab expansion, disposal, Copper Cove wastewater Phase A and Phase B. We're going to need to either take out more debt or find grants to complete those. Some of those expansions can look for expansion funds capacity, but that's where the challenge comes in. If you're going to repay a loan based on capacity fees only, lenders are very dubious of that, because you cannot adequately project how many new connections per year you're going to get. We had that issue in 2008-9 with the recession, when our connections dropped down dramatically. So that's going to be a challenge we're going to be facing and trying to come up with solutions. When you look at the sewer side, we only have 40% of the funds identified. Now, these CIP projects and the budgets obviously are fluid based on what projects come up or the immediacy or some type of repairs. But it's important to understand that if you add a project, you're going to have to defer or eliminate a project unless there's grant or loans. And unfortunately, our debt capacity isn't going to increase until we pay off that R&R loan. So that's where our challenges lie.
So the La Quintana rehab expansion, that's strictly growth related? That doesn't have any benefits to any of the existing customers?
It's a combination of both. It's a rehab expansion. So the expansion portion will be covered by expansion fees, but unfortunately, we don't have enough expansion fees to cover that at this point.
So is it 14% of the expansion fees or 14% of the total project?
14% of the total project is funded. But that, if you look at your
It's a
budget,
combination of rates and,
yes.
okay.
And if you look at that particular project, we're going to do a little bit of it up front to do some of the design and planning and design. And also some of that is the purchase of the property. And we used a loan from reserves for that.
Yeah.
A couple of takeaways here. It was very difficult to balance a budget. Director Underhill made a comment at the Finance Committee meeting. She's concerned that we don't have enough money for the people to do their jobs. We think we can do it. It's not going to be easy. We don't see any new positions within the next 5 years except for maybe one, and that will be an engineer. And the reason we will be able to do that is that individual, his or her time, should be able to be charged to projects, which we can offset 60 to 70% of the cost. Anything else we want within positions, it's going to have to be looking at existing positions, reallocating resources, and working within our framework. So it's not impossible, but we have to really look at things and what the district needs versus what the district wants. We're basically down to needs, and especially in these next 3 years, because we know there's a lot of work that needs to be done out in the field. We know there's projects that need to be done. We just need to make sure we allocate resources to the needs. And unfortunately, I don't see any additional positions other than that engineer, because it can come from R&R and CIP funding to cover up to 70% of it. Other than that, we're really going to tighten our belt. And that's the promise we made to the ratepayers. When your board approved the rates, we're taking on the burden as much as anybody else. So it's important to understand that, at least from my perspective, I represent the district, but I also represent the ratepayers. I want to make sure that what we do is necessary, not what we'd like to do, but what we need to do. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. I will be coming back to your board on Tuesday with the board workshop to get into a little bit more at 1 p.m. here in the boardroom. Any
Okay.
questions?
Well, thank you, Jeff. Any questions from the board?
Well, I just wanted to ask a question about your summary that you presented. It said we wanted to minimize long-term financial costs, unnecessary borrowing, and large unplanned expenditures. How do we do that?
It's not easy. The large unplanned expenditures, a lot of that you have to be proactive on the maintenance side, especially on our R&R. We don't want to run equipment and facilities to failure because it becomes very expensive then. We have to be a little bit more proactive, and Jesse and Charles and Bob and all of their people are looking at that, trying to get ahead of the game. And if you look at some of these projects, especially the newer projects, that's what they're doing. And that's why we're investing now to save moving forward. We look at things in a way that makes sense business-wise. What we have done may not work. We may have to take a look at how our resources are allocated, start going back to where do we need bodies, where do we need resources, where do we need work to be done, and then figure out what's the best way to get that accomplished, and working within strict parameters. It's not easy, Director Underhill. It's one of the things we in finance budget live with constantly. I've been in this business for 20 plus years, and I've never had a budget that was easy.
Any other questions, comments? Any public comment on this agenda item? Michael, welcome.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Michael Minkler with Utica Water and Power. I normally wouldn't comment on this kind of thing. And I think, as Jeff said, it's incredibly difficult to arrive at a balanced budget with all that he's dealing with. The one comment I feel like I should make, though, has to do with the FERC licensing fund. And I know you got a lot of different priorities that you have to balance, and I know Jeff understands the importance of making that investment. But it's, and I don't know that you don't have a fund balance in this presentation, so I don't know the status of that fund currently. I just would remind you how critical that's going to be in the next 10 to 15 years. And at Utica, we're in the same situation. Our licenses, our FERC licenses expire the same year as yours. And to give you an idea of how big of a priority it is for us, we're still, our revenue situation is slowly improving, but we're still facing pretty significant budget deficits, and we're setting aside almost 5% of our revenue into a FERC relicensing fund at this point. So with a balanced budget, maybe it is something that you could, make an investment in. That'd be my only comment, and we'll look forward to partnering with you on that effort. We'll be going through it together.
So what is 5% of your budget?
Our budget this year is about $2 million. So we're doing about $100,000 per year into FERC relicensing fund, which is
Not enough.
not enough. It's a small increment that we need to maintain until we do get to where we want to be with our revenue. But we know we're going to have to do even more in the coming years.
Yeah, I really think that we need to begin to brainstorm other opportunities besides, rates on, and maybe it's a countywide effort, or, even, a form of a countywide water bond or FERC bond. The public is, that FERC relicense is not just ratepayer driven. It
Right.
provides value for the whole community, everybody. But I don't think people understand it. Most people don't even know we have those up here, and they certainly won't understand why it's gonna cost us $15 million, in a county of 45,000 people. I don't know how we're gonna get there, but I think we really need to begin to have some open discussions and start to come up with some creative ideas about this. And certainly we need to be educating the public more on the importance of these, of the FERC relicensing and the scope of it.
Okay, I don't want to get too far off topic here of budget, but Jeff's right, Mike, and you were right on point. That North Fork project is our most important thing we got going on, and within the next 10 years. And maybe it is a good idea to bring us up in future agenda items and have a workshop at some point in the future. And Dave, our counsel, would certainly be helpful in telling us where we're at, what we need to be. We do have a limited time to get there.
Yeah,
And these are great.
I think those are great points, and I think we should be collaborating on educating the public on how important those issues are. Our licenses are going to be significantly less expensive than yours, but it still is a proportion of our budget. It's a huge investment that does benefit the whole community. I can tell you, we have had some of those discussions at staff level. I just had lunch with Peter. I've talked about this stuff with Joel and with Dave. Just brainstorming different approaches, different ways where we can collaborate on this issue, and it's going to be crucial. We're going through it together.
Engage more local expertise, like Tridam did with the Lake Tulloch FERC. Save a lot of money rather than pay for fifth story office space. These large consulting firms.
Well, we still want our 5-story office building. Maybe next
All
year.
right, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Ryan Gunstream. I'm from Honeywell Services Group. I wasn't going to get up until Director Davidson mentioned in his comment. I wanted to get up and just say how much I appreciate Dave and Joel and Peter. I've had some recent conversations. We're an energy services company. We specialize in helping public agencies make infrastructure upgrades without capital. So when you mentioned taking an alternative approach and looking at new ways to solve this equation, I just wanted to get up and compliment the staff for not kind of sticking to what has traditionally been a very difficult problem to solve, but truly looking at new alternatives and new ways, and hope to bring more solutions to y'all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Any other public comment?
I would just like to follow up with what Michael said. As I mentioned in my discussion, we are going to come back and revisit this in mid-year, which is January. The funding that we identified several months back would be the Special Project Fund, property tax revenues. And by mid-year, I'll have a better feel for where we stand in revenues and to see what revenues we have available left over in the allocation to the special project fund, which we can then start allocating in this year. It's not as if it's not on the plate. We've been talking about it internally. We've been brainstorming. We're starting to look at planning options. It's just that at this particular point in time, not knowing where we stand on final property tax revenues and moving forward, I think it's prudent to wait until January.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're, there's no, moving on our agenda, there is no old business. General manager report. Jeff, you have anything to report for Dave? Okay. Board reports. Bertha, we'll start with you.
Okay, great. Epoch is dark in July. And then one of the things that I got emailed to me was a new sign up for Calaveras Alert. Is the board aware of this? We have a new alert system established in Calaveras County. And so this is out of the Office of Emergency Services. And I already talked to Joel about it, and he's aware of this. But I think, I was thinking, would we be taking on too much to put just a notation on our water bill, telling our customers to call Office of Emergency Services and, you know, ask about this? I mean, what would that do?
Our bi-monthly statements do have a message box within them, and we update that message every other month, so each ratepayer can see the same message. It's something we can take into consideration as far as timing. One of the things we're looking at too is using these next couple statements to make sure people are aware of the new rates that are in place. But
Well,
it's all a matter, yes, it is something that
Priority.
if you give to Joel, we can look to work that in. We only have so many characters.
Right, it's priority, and again, this is fire season, and so let's think seriously about that. Okay,
Russ.
The only thing that I want to talk about is this morning I had to drive down to Stockton again for the groundwater recharge effort. There's been a little bit of a pretty significant change in the format of those meetings. They've formed a technical advisory committee, made that formalized, and Peter is our representative on that technical advisory committee. They will meet on the second Wednesday of each month from 9 o'clock until 11 or 10:30. And then the group that I've been attending, the 17 representatives of the various agencies, their meeting is only from 11 to 12 on that date. So it looks to me like the heavy lifting is going to be like we do, is we make staff do it and then we come and talk about it. But I think that's a good move on the part of the organization, and we approved the budget today. And they'll be sending out the billing for our participation. That we've talked about it a lot of times, but we're sharing our financial responsibility will only be 50-50 with Stanislaus County. And then I think that the county is going to pick up the 50% of our responsibilities. So our expenditure keeps going down, which is good for us. But that's the only thing that I have to report. Thank you.
Jeff.
I don't have anything to report.
Terry.
I think it was last week. I stopped by, there were repairs made in Wilseyville in the water system there, and saw the crews working, and so I pulled over and took a look at things, and yeah, it looks really great. Repairing that old pipe that was a real problem. I think they did a really good job. Did a lot of outreach to the local residents there. I didn't receive any complaints whatsoever, which I normally do if something goes a little to the left, so to speak. But so yeah, I think that was great, and you guys did a good job. My only comment is hard hats and the wearing of hard hats. You might let the folks know. I mean, any construction project, if there's an accident and Yeah, they really should, even though it was a pretty hot day, they're still, I had my hard hat on. But, yeah, just remind the guys, you know, a little safety meeting or whatever, tailgate stuff. But again, they did great. I met a lot of the crews that were out there, the staff and all. So that was super, and I think that was a major issue that had been on the books here for a couple of years to address that replacement because of breakages and then having to cut into the new asphalt that they were laying down, and they felt really, yeah, there was a lot of anxiety about the whole asphalt patch and all, so good job. Other than that, nothing else.
Okay, just we do have a camera meeting next week, next Wednesday, a week from today, here in this building at 2:30. And then next Friday, the 22nd, is the Aqua Region 3 tour. It starts at Pardee about 8 a.m. And I think it's pretty much around time to sign up for that, or I think that we might even have passed the deadline, but there may still be room. And as far as the the camera meeting, one of the things on our agenda is to discuss planning a tour of some of our own facilities. We're probably on the McQualamy, of course, so it'll probably be one of our facilities and one of CPUD's facilities. And that'll be planned in the fall is what we're looking at. Okay, on to, that's all I got. Our next board meetings are Tuesday, June 19th, 1 p.m. in this room. That's our budget workshop. Jeff will have a great presentation for us and a lot of interesting discussion. Wednesday, June 27th is a regular board meeting here in this room, and it's most likely for the budget adoption. And then Wednesday, July 11th, 1 p.m. here in this room. We're going to go into closed session now for 3 items, item 9A, 9B, and 9C on the agenda. And then we'll be back to report if there's any reportable action. Thank you.
You know where we're going?
No. Through that door somewhere.